All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Cindy Nellis, and we are launching today our OSHA employee training requirement. We're excited that you're here. Let me just roll this. Okay. Today we'll be talking about employee training requirements. But first, I want to give you a quick introduction of the Small Business Development Center. The Small Business Development Center is an organization that is here with a mission to help businesses start, grow, and prosper. We do that through offering our one-on-one business consulting services that are at no cost and that are confidential. We also offer training seminars like today, and obviously our training seminars are being offered virtually, in person, and on demand. And I'll actually provide you with a link to a listing of all of the SBDC workshops across the state. In addition, the Small Business Development Centers offer a lot of great tools and resources to help you in your journey of being an entrepreneur and a small business owner. These come in the form of databases that focus on financial analysis, industry and marketing research, and financial analysis. I don't know if I said that again. In addition, we offer a lot of great guides, a lot of forms, and a lot of templates. Our sweet spot truly has always been business plans and financial projections, but of course we have a lot of great resources now focused on marketing and websites and human resources, and the list goes on and on. So if you're a small business owner and you haven't connected with the Small Business Development Center, we're going to suggest that you do. Today's workshop, well, and here's our statewide map that shows you that the Small Business Development Center, we are all hosted at institutions of higher education, and there is an SBDC that covers every county in Pennsylvania. We are funded by our host institution, as well as the Small Business Administration on a federal level, and the Department of Community and Economic Development on their line item called PREP, Partnership for Regional Economic Performance, and that's where our state funding comes from. I apologize for my voice. I'm trying to get it back. In addition, the Small Business Development Center, a number of our centers across the state are part of the WEDNET program. We here at Clarion, we are a WEDNET partner. WEDNET stands for Workforce and Economic Development Network, and this is a program that provides funding directly to businesses to help them stay competitive by updating and improving their employee skills. So the most important thing is to find out if you have the need to train your employees and it's going to cost you something, that you check with the WEDNET program to see if your business is eligible, number one, if your employee is eligible, number two, and if the training that you're looking to provide to them is eligible, that's number three. And if all of that is in line, you can secure a potential of up to $2,000 per employee. So to check to see if any of those, if any is eligible, we encourage you to go to www.wednetpa.com and put in an inquiry. And then of course, if that's confusing or that doesn't look quite right to you and you just have a few questions, I encourage you to reach out to our SBDC and we will connect you with our WEDNET coordinator. Okay, one thing that I did forget to mention, today we are providing this training on employee requirements through our partnership with OSHA, and that partnership is collaborative with the Gannon University Small Business Development Center. So thank you, Sandy, for being with us today. And so I provide you with both contact information for me at Penn West, Clarion SBDC, and for Sandy at Gannon University Small Business Development Center. But you're not here to hear from me. You're here to hear from our great speakers. We have two awesome individuals who are here to provide our content today. First is Mark Harmon. Mark is the Compliance Assistant Specialist with the U.S. Department of Labor in the OSHA Erie area office. And Mark's been with us for, gosh, many, many years now, Mark. So we're excited to have you here. And then David Yushanashek, and he is with the SHARP Outreach Coordinator. He's with the Pennsylvania OSHA Consultation Program, which is an awesome program to partner up with today's workshop. And like us, having no cost outreach services, he's here to help you see and understand how his program can also help you like ours. So with that, I am going to bring up Mark's slideshow. And then after Mark is done, we'll turn it over to David and we'll get started. I guess while I'm sharing this one, I do want to just a few logistics for today. If you have a question for me or Sandy here at the Small Business Development Center, please use the chat feature. And if you have a question for Mark or David, we ask that you use the Q&A, and then we'll just make sure that we answer all of your questions before we finish today. All right, I think I've covered it all. So with that, Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cindy. Yes, today's topic, the employee training requirements. We have done this in the past, if I'm not mistaken. May have been a few years ago, but I think it's an important topic, and I hope that you are able to get information that would be useful to you and your company. The PowerPoint that we provide today, it will be available to send out. There's nothing on there that would be proprietary, so we'd be more than happy to allow that to be distributed. Along with, we do have a couple of documents, publications that the federal OSHA website has that would be helpful or specific to the topic. And I hope, as Cindy said, we can answer questions today if possible. By all means, the audience, we hope to get input, or if you do have questions, by all means, put those in the chat and we will try to answer those as we go. So let's go to the next slide. It's just my disclaimer. I have to put that on all my material that goes out to the public. So go to the next one. Today, the agenda. What does OSHA regulate? We always like to try to explain so that we understand what the OSHA regulations cover, what companies are regulated. We will talk about the employee training requirements as they are listed in the OSHA standards. Again, if you can imagine the topic training, there are many OSHA standards that apply to many various types of operations. But I guess to try to simplify that, we want you to understand you as a company, your operation, your business, you need to have an understanding of what OSHA standards would apply to you. And then from that, determine, does that OSHA standard have a training requirement? And if so, what does that training requirement include? We will talk a little bit about identifying site-specific hazards. Again, the idea being that not all companies are the same. If you have one company that's in the wood industry that says, it's a sawmill, the training requirements for those workers would be quite different than someone, say, who works, say, in a retail store setting. So again, site-specific hazards are important. You as the company need to identify what those hazards are. Training resources, these are things that would be available to you as a company. We'll include some information where those can be found. We'll talk about the regulation language on training. Again, some OSHA standards say the word training, some of the OSHA standards say the word the employee shall be instructed. So again, we want you to understand what some of that language or the difference in that language may be. We will also cover the topic of temporary workers and how that relates to training requirements. We will end the PowerPoint that I have with just a brief introduction about the OSHA consultation service, as Dave will be on after I am, and he can go into much more detail with that. Let's go to the next slide. What does OSHA regulate? If you're not familiar, the OSHA agency that is within the U.S. Department of Labor regulates the workplace safety and health aspect of operations. Specific, we're looking at the employees' protection so that they have a safe and healthy work environment. It is the company or the employer's responsibility to protect them. The OSHA Act covers most private sector employers and their workers in the what we say the 50 states and the few territories that we do have under federal jurisdiction. Again, the map on the upper right indicates the 50 continuous states, but also think of these territories. So, you know, Guam, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, things like that. So again, to understand when people think of OSHA, we regulate most places where people work, but we don't regulate all places where people work. So if you're in the private sector, again, think of that, that's the private businesses. That could be anything from the largest, you know, Amazon, eBay, things like this that are, you know, quite large in size, all the way down to the smallest company um, that has at least one employee. So again, if it's privately owned, it's probably regulated by OSHA, with a few exceptions of things that we are not responsible for. And those types of companies may be regulated by other agencies. So let's go to the next one. There are many labor standards out there. Um, what we will focus on today, if you can hit the button again, we will focus on today the General Industry 1910. That's the book, the standards that most of these training slides that I put together come from. I believe that's what most of this audience that is on the webinar today is covered by. General industry includes everything from manufacturing, retail, oil and gas. Um, most industries that we regulate are covered by general industry, the 1910 standards. We will talk briefly a little bit about the record keeping 1904, but just for a little piece of the training requirement. All these other ones, again, separate. Construction, agriculture, we're not going to get into the training requirements for those particular industries. Let's go to the next one. The general duty clause. I always try to throw this in because, again, if you are familiar with OSHA, OSHA has the books that I just mentioned there on the previous slide, but OSHA does have what is referred to or known as the general duty clause under the OSHA Act of 1970 under Section 5A1. It simply says that each employer shall furnish to each of his employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his employees. The point of that particular passage is if there is a work hazard that is identified at the company, it's the company's responsibility to ensure and protect the worker from any physical harm. So if we have an OSHA standard, something that is written in the OSHA book, we would issue based on that standard. If we don't have something written in the OSHA standard book, we could use this particular section of the OSHA Act and cite that under General Duty 5A1. So again, it's not used often. It's actually, I'll say, not often at all if you compare it to the number of citations that are issued and violations when OSHA has their enforcement inspections. But it is written So I guess I try to tell people, just because you don't see something in an OSHA standard relative to safety, you still, if it's a recognized hazard and you have exposure in the workplace, it's up to the company. It's their responsibility to protect the worker. An example of this, and again, if we had more time, I'd go into much greater detail. I know we've done this particular topic previously in years past, but think of a seatbelt requirement on a powered industrial truck. There is no OSHA standard for that particular hazard, but we understand, as I'm sure you do, that's a recognized hazard. And when we find perhaps a work environment where an employee is operating a fork truck that doesn't have a seatbelt, we would issue it a violation under this particular section 5A1. So that's one example. Let's go to the next slide. Employers shall provide employees with effective site-specific training on hazards in their work area at the time of their initial assignment, when they first are hired in, or when they go to a particular new job, or whenever a new hazard the employees have not been previously trained is introduced into their work area. So some standards do require annual retraining. Not all, but some of them do. Let's go to the next slide. These are some of the questions that I did find. If you can see there at the very bottom, I can see the web link that I included on the OSHA webpage under training. People ask this question quite often. I thought it was appropriate to include. It says, does OSHA require the 10 and 30-hour outreach courses? If you're not familiar, OSHA does have available training. Probably the most common is the OSHA 10-hour class. And I get this question quite often. People say, do I have to have that? And the answer is no. They are voluntary. OSHA recommends outreach courses as an orientation to occupational safety and health for workers. However, some states have enacted laws that mandate the training. Again, certain states. Pennsylvania is not one of them. Pennsylvania is a federal state. The OSHA 10-hour class is not required. It does go on to say that some employers, unions, organizations, and other jurisdictions may also require this training, but it's not federal OSHA. That's who I work for. So I guess I tell people it's good to have OSHA 10-hour training. But the problem is, or what we run into is, it's not site specific, right? So again, I guess to give you a hypothetical, in an OSHA 10-hour class, you perhaps would have training on, let's pick a topic, hazard communication. That's good. That's a good OSHA standard in that it speaks to the hazards relating to chemicals that are used in the work environment or other substances that may be dangerous. So if you're in an OSHA 10-hour class, that topic perhaps would be included. It would be entitled, HAZCOM. They would probably talk about it probably up for about an hour. Hazard communication, the use of chemicals, the substances that can be dangerous. The problem is, if you work at a company and you have very specific or unique chemicals, um, there's no way that could have been covered in an OSHA 10-hour class, because you're in there with many other people, you're in there with other companies that, again, you have to think of the variety. So we always say, or we speak to, specific site hazards are required when training workers. Let's go to the next question. Does outreach training meet any OSHA training requirements? And the answer is no. And again, this is back to what I just said. When we do outreach training, again, we're talking, at the 30,000 foot view. As a company, the company needs to be training to what it is that they have, what they're exposed to, what hazards they have in their work environment. A list of standards requiring training can be found in a publication that we have. That's number 2254. There's a link here. You can download that. Again, that's another document I wanted to be sent out to the people that are in attendance today. But when you have training, make sure that the training is specific to the hazards of the location of the company, but also to the particular job that they may have, right? If somebody's working with, you know, again, if you have powered industrial trucks, you would need to have powered industrial truck training. Um, what type of powered industrial truck training? Okay, well, what type of trucks does the company have, right? Not all fork trucks are the same size, shape. They're different configurations. So always ensure that your training is specific to the company, specific to the hazards that the company has. Let's go to the next slide. Today, some of the training topics that we will try to break down into categories. I put this slide together just to show, right? You can have training requirements for personal protective equipment. You can have training requirements for the environment. You can have it for equipment that may be used. Temporary workers could be a specific category of training, and also training is required in certain OSHA standards for the informational value. So let's go to the next slide. The OSHA poster, that is a requirement. I put this up here. This is just screenshot. Hit the button once, maybe twice. There's actually two specific notes here under the OSHA poster that mention the word training. The first saying that all workers have a right to receive information and training on job hazards, including all hazardous substances in their workplace. Again, making reference perhaps to the HAZCOM standard. The second one over here, it says the employer is required to provide training to all workers in a language and a vocabulary they can understand. This was something that was included only just a few years ago because, again, we come to find out not everyone, English is not everyone's primary language. So if you have people at your company that do not speak English, then the training they receive needs to be in a language that they can understand. So I would point you to perhaps a service or someone who would be able to translate or make that information available. Again, it's important when you are training that people are able to understand and comprehend the information that you're providing to them. And it so says that on the OSHA poster now. So let's go to the next slide. This is just the OSHA webpage. I always try to point this out because, again, if you are looking for information, resources, the OSHA website has many, many resources that could be utilized for training, research, looking for information that could be helpful to you and your company. If you ever need help finding something and you can't find it yourself, I always say, call me or shoot me an email. I'd be happy to talk to you, or I'm sure I can look for it. I can find it, and I'll cut and paste, send it to you. But yeah, your first contact or your first resource should always be at the OSHA website. Let's go to the next slide. This document right here, I know we've put this out to the audience in the past. It is helpful. I think it was put together just recently. They updated it. I can see here it says 2021. So this was after we got into the COVID pandemic. It is 83 pages, so it's like a magazine, but it has a tremendous amount of information that could be useful. And it is geared toward, as you can see by the title, Small Business Safety and Health Handbook. It does have sections on here by specific topic. It does go into the requirements as far as the OSHA standards. So again, if you don't have a copy of this, I would ask or advise you to download a copy of this, or you could then print it, make it available, share it with managers, share it with your safety committee. Again, it would be very helpful and I think useful. Next slide. Here's the one booklet that I mentioned earlier. This was put together I can see here the most current edition is the 2015. It's says 270 pages. So yeah, this is quite thick. But again, it's specific to, as the title so says, the training requirements and OSHA standards. So the way in which you would utilize this, you're looking through the book and you're looking at OSHA um, topics. Looking in there at the very one on the very bottom, talks about personal protective equipment. If the company you work in, the operation you have, um, uses personal protective equipment, you would look at those pages and be able to read what the actual OSHA standard so says, but it would be specific for the training, right? So anytime there's a training requirement in an OSHA standard, the book, it will be in this publication. Uh, Again, first few times that you use it, because it's a PDF, I tell people, uh, it has search capability, right? You type in the search block, I'm looking for lockout tagout. It would look for that, and then it would pull that out of the publication. So if you don't have this one, I use this myself when people say, "Hey, what's the training requirement on powered industrial trucks?" I usually I'll go to this publication, I'll cut and paste it, and I'll email it back to them, and I'll say, "Well, this is what the OSHA standard says." So very useful. This is, again, something you should have on your shelf. Let's go to the next one. Again, the way the personal protective equipment, I use that example. If you were to look inside the OSHA standards, if you're familiar with this under subpart I, as you can see, 1910, 132 is a general requirements. The general requirements are probably going to say something to the effect, the company's responsible to conduct a personal protective equipment hazard assessment, but then it would go further and so point out that there are training requirements if these particular types of PPE are required at your company. As you can see, they're broken out by part of the body, eyes and face, respiratory, head, foot, right, hand protection. Let's go to the next slide. So the training requirements, again, to go just a little bit deeper here for training, under 132, under general requirements, under paragraph F, it does indicate, and again, because of the length of the paragraph, I couldn't put the whole paragraph in there, but I just wanted to give you a little snippet. It does say under paragraph 132 F1, the employer shall provide training to each employee. Under paragraph F2, it says the employee shall demonstrate an understanding of the training. All right, do you see the verbiage on, or right, how that's written? It's indicating that the company has to somehow make sure that the employee understands what they've been trained. So it doesn't say the word test, but I would say if you're giving somebody a test, that would be a way to fulfill that way of demonstrating the understanding. They could put the personal protective equipment on, right? They could, if we're talking about, give me an example, wearing earplugs for hearing protection. Okay. Sometimes I've had people say, well, we trained them on how to use hearing protection. I'm going, that's good. Did you demonstrate how to put them in, if they're disposable? Because again, it's a very specific type of equipment. And I'll say in my experience, not everybody knows how to put in earplugs in such a way that they are effective in what you're hoping that they are able to do, which is reduce the amount of noise in the work environment. Again, I know it sounds basic, but you just don't put it in your ear, because you have to, depending upon the manufacturer, what type of earplug it is, disposable, right? They will give you instructions on how to properly insert the earplug into your ear. And believe it or not, I've seen people, they set them in there sideways. they don't put them in such a way that they're not effective. So if you look under paragraph F on this same standard, it does say F3 says that the employer shall retrain each employee. And again, if you read further into that, and again, I couldn't include all of it, but think of retraining if you see someone who's not doing something that they have been trained on properly. So a good example, again, I'll use that earplug example. If you see someone that's either not wearing their PPE or not wearing it properly, guess what? That would trigger some type of retraining requirement, right? So let's go to the next slide. Under 132, see, and look, I screenshot this particular page. This is what we just covered in the previous slide. It says, right, the employer shall provide training to each employee who is required to use personal protective equipment. And that training should include what? At least the following: when it's necessary, what PPE is necessary, how to properly don or doff, that means put it on or take it off, adjust and wear, the limitations of the PPE, proper care, maintenance, useful life, and disposal. Again, all of these have their requirements of personal protective equipment because, as you know, or you should, personal protective equipment has limitations. A good example, think of like gloves. If you're using gloves, right, not all gloves are able to do everything. So some gloves may be, for laceration protection, right? Think of like a thick leather glove. To whereas if you're, working in a healthcare setting, you probably want something that would be, impervious to whatever bloodborne pathogens. So think of latex. But again, if you don't train the employee on that limitation, they may not always understand that. So this becomes an issue, right? If a compliance officer, if OSHA's on site and you see somebody doing something they shouldn't, using a sharp knife, laceration hazard. But you look at the type of glove they're using, and it's not protecting them from cutting their hand. So think of like a Kevlar, something that would be protected from a type of cut. The other requirements under F2 talks about, right, they need to demonstrate an understanding of the training they've received. F3 talks about if the employer has reason to believe the affected employee has already been trained, does not have the understanding or skills, the employer shall retrain the employee, right? So again, back to that, if you see something that's not happening, that they're not doing it as they were trained, then that should trigger a retraining requirement. So let's go to the next one. And again, this even, I found, a YouTube video that shows people how to put in formable earplugs. These are the disposable ones. And again, the purpose of the personal protective equipment, in this case, hearing protection, is to protect their hearing. If they're not wearing the earplugs correctly, I can assure you, they're exceeding the dosage of the noise, and over time it will cause hearing loss. So, and again, even plugs like this, people say, well, the employees are wearing hearing protection. Okay, there's a limitation to what that actually will protect you. So just because you have hearing protection in earplugs, depending upon the amount of noise, right, that is in the area, you could still be above the exposure limit. So think of, in this case, I guess I'm trying to use the example of, it's not uncommon if you're in a very high noise environment that you could have two forms of hearing protection. So you could have the plugs, but then you could have a muff over top of it. I know in my experience, we use that in aviation because of, again, the amount of noise that was in the environment from the aircraft, the jet engines, right? We would have a set of plugs and we would have a set of muffs. Again, trying to ensure that the amount of noise exposure we had was below the exposure limit. Let's go to the next one. Let's jump to a piece of equipment, powered industrial truck. This is something, again, a very common piece of equipment in the work environment. If you have this type of equipment, what are the training requirements? Um, Under 1910, 178, paragraph L1, it says the employer shall ensure each powered industrial truck operator is competent to operate the powered industrial truck safely, as demonstrated successful completion of training and evaluation as specified in paragraph L. The next one. So again, that said a few things, right? You have to be competent and you have to demonstrate. So if you go further into the training standard, it says training shall consist of a combination of formal instruction. And when we say combination, it gives two specific requirements: a practical training, formal instruction, which is the lecture. Think of like a classroom where they're sitting down, maybe listening. But the practical training requirement being the second part, it is a demonstration. So after you have trained them, you should put them on the fork truck and allow them to operate it, right? So two requirements for compliance with the training for powered industrial trucks. Let's go to the next one. There's also further description. If you go into paragraph L4, it talks about refresher and evaluation. So again, it gives that example that we had talked about in the previous example. If someone is operating a fork truck and they're not following either what would be the rules to operate, or they have what would be either an accident or a near miss, that would be perhaps a requirement for a refresher or retraining of the operator. There is an evaluation requirement, and I highlighted that at the bottom. It does say that an evaluation of powered industrial truck operators' performance shall be conducted at least every 3 years. So if an employee comes to work and you want them to be a fork truck operator, you would train them when they first arrive. But then if you ever, at any point in the future, if you ever notice they were speeding, they weren't wearing the seatbelt. Remember, we we used the example of the seatbelt. Even though there's no OSHA standard for wearing a seatbelt on a fork truck, we would still consider that a recognized hazard and issue a 5A1 citation if you were not wearing it. So always make them wear the seatbelts. Even if they are operating safely, no problems. On a 3-year cycle, the company must evaluate. It doesn't say the word retrain. It doesn't go so far as to do that. It says evaluate. So to me, an evaluation should take less time. It may not be as involved, but it still must be done. So, and again, the idea behind that perhaps is we don't want people just to be trained when they get to a company and, 20 years goes by without anyone ever considering, is this person, you know, still able to operate the fork truck. Again, I don't like to
Mark,
compare. Yes.
we have two questions in the
Oh,
chat.
I didn't even see them.
How much practical training does a forklift operator need prior to the evaluation?
Uh, we don't go into numbers, right? We don't say, is it 5 minutes? Is it 5 hours? I don't have an answer, but I usually try to say it depends on the complexity of the operation. If you just have somebody say, running a fork truck and they're picking stuff up and moving it around on the floor, that seems to me very easy. It shouldn't take long to get someone, trained up on that. But again, if you jump to the other end of the spectrum, what if you're working in an Amazon warehouse and you got stuff, on racks that are 50 feet in the air? Okay, really go through some process to make sure that people are comfortable. With, if you have something that has a very high boom on it, right? Fork trucks now come in all different shapes and sizes. I would tell you, you should make sure that they have an understanding and they are comfortable operating the fork truck before you say that they are qualified. So I don't have a number, but I will tell you, if a compliance officer asks, a compliance officer will say, what type of training have they had? And you as the company, you should be able to demonstrate at least two types, meaning that you have the lecture, the classroom, but then also the demonstration. I usually, again, asked a lot of questions of the operator. Interviews, right? We would talk to the operator and say, hey, how much training did you get and was it useful? I know that didn't answer the question, but I would say I don't have a number, but I would hope that the company has perhaps a lesson plan or a protocol that they follow that would perhaps explain that. And to me, a lot of it would depend upon the trainer. What does the trainer think? Is this person ready to be a fork truck operator?
I think that kind of covers the second question. It was, could
And
you give greater detail on the practical training? So I think that
yeah,
kind
the
of touches
practical
on that.
training. I mean, we've seen companies really go. I've seen them set up obstacle courses. I mean, like in a parking lot, yeah, you want to put this person through the paces, because again, think of, this fork truck. It's a good piece of equipment. It's very useful, but it's like any other machine. And please don't make the mistake that we sometimes run into with companies that they'll say, well, this person has a driver's license. Okay, that is completely irrelevant. A fork truck is nothing compared to a car. A fork truck operates completely different. The wheels, the steering wheels are in the back in most cases. It has a boom on it, right? You're lifting things, so the center of gravity changes. Yeah, make sure that the fork truck training specific to your type of equipment, what type of environment do you have it in? There's many things that you should be covering in your fork truck training. Okay.
And then could an operator operate until the official evaluation?
Say that one more time. Can an operator operate? What?
Yes. So probably can they use the forklift? Let's use that example until an official evaluation.
Until the official. Well, when you're training them, yes, there is the ability. If somebody is in training, they are allowed to operate the fork truck. Does that make sense? But again, I wouldn't want somebody to think that they should be in training for a week. Does that make sense? You shouldn't be out there operating it, working. If you're in training, you should be training, right? So back to, as I said, make sure that your trainer, the instructor, is observing and watching this person. It should be something that they have the ability to say, for the next 3 hours, we are going to go through training and we're going to demonstrate. You shouldn't be out, I guess, on the production floor, moving product around as part of your training. The training should be complete at the initial assignment. Anytime that there is deficiencies noticed, like, right, you saw the guy speeding and, hey, guess what? We're going to have to get you through retraining or refresher. And again, at the 3-year marker, the evaluation, right? But yeah, and if you are training to be an operator, you can get behind the wheel, right? Yes. Let's go to the next slide. Hazard communication. Let's talk a little bit about chemicals and information that would be important. Under HAZCOM, right? 1200 paragraph H, the employer shall provide employees with effective information and training on hazardous chemicals in their work area at the time of initial assignment, before they are exposed, and whenever a new chemical hazard the employee has not previously been trained on is introduced. So yeah, if you have a particular operation and you're using chemicals, could be materials, substances. The employees need to be aware of that. What are these materials? How can they harm me? What means do I need to protect myself? So HAZCOM training is a very common OSHA requirement. Again, because all businesses are different, I mean, if you're working, in a manufacturing setting, yeah, you're probably going to have any number of materials you need to be aware of. Could be something that could be caustic, right? Something that could be corrosive, could, burn your skin. Could be something that you're using that could enter your body through something other than inhalation, right? People sometimes think, well, I'm not breathing it, I'm only touching it. Okay, well, chemicals, materials, there are some that will be absorbed through your skin. And again, training is so important. Where do you get that information so that you can pass on? Safety data sheets, that's an excellent source, right? Because it'll be specific to the substance, material, the chemical, and it will so say, what are the hazards? What are the dangers? What type of personal protective equipment must be used? Do I need leather gloves or do I need latex gloves? Right? So again, HAZCOM training, we see this cited very often. And again, it could be not just the company or the operation, but it could be, think of all the different chemicals or materials that they're using, right? They will say they did training 5 years ago, but they haven't done any since. But when we start looking at the chemicals and, next thing you know, somebody says, well, this is brand new. We just got this last year. And we're going, oh yeah, what material is that? Did you do any training on it? Because under the HAZCOM standard, it says if you have a new chemical, you have to train on it, right? So HAZCOM training is a very, very important issue, and you as the company should be aware of that. Let's go to the next slide. Safety data sheets, as I said, right? Very important. Any operations, the work area where hazardous chemicals are present, location and availability of written HAZCOM program, including the required list of the chemicals and the safety data sheets. That's all part of the training that should be included. Let's go to the next one. Under HAZCOM, under paragraph H3, it goes into further detail of what we just so spoke about. Methods and observation to be used to detect the presence, right? Some chemicals you can smell, but there's some other chemicals that have no smell, right? The odor, it's odorless. And I've had people say, well, or some chemicals can be even more mysterious in that they have an odor up until a point, and then it can be overwhelming to your senses and you don't smell it, right? So there's the safety is so important because, again, what we learn in our training of particular materials and substances can be very helpful. Just because someone says, well, I've been using this for a long time and I don't have any problem, and you look at them and you go, your hands, your hands, it looks like you have dermatitis. Your skin is very dried out, it's dehydrated. And again, you ask them a few questions. Well, what type of chemicals do you use? And again, it's just, you go, wow, you don't wear any personal protective equipment when you're using that, because that's a very harmful substance. And again, I know you say that it's not hurting you, but I'm looking at your skin and yes, it is. It is hurting you. So again, read those labels, make sure that you have training on the chemicals, the substances, the things that are in your area. So let's go to the next slide. Pictograms, these came out right when we updated the HAZCOM standard back in 2012. My understanding, that's actually on the regulatory agenda for 2024. We may be getting a new update for HAZCOM. But again, the pictograms, when they came out, right, these are the visual illustrations about specific hazards to particular chemicals. So again, a lot of these, some of them were new, some of them were ones that we were familiar with. This should be something that would be included in your HAZCOM training. The pictograms, understand, so that they, when they see these symbols, they know what they mean, because this will be on the labels that are used in the materials, the chemicals, the containers. So pictograms, learn about that if you don't know. Let's go to the next slide. The environment, again, I tried to, from a 30,000 foot view, tried to learn some of these things, because not everyone's environment is the same. I understand that. Some people work inside, some people work outside. I put links on this particular slide so that you could look further into some of these training requirements. Temperatures, that's become a big issue. I know, last year when we had our heat initiative, heat illness prevention was a big item. We tell companies that, hey, be familiar with some of these safety and health related issues. Lockout, tag out. I know that's something, again, the control of hazardous energy. People sometimes will say, well, only a few people do that. Okay, well, the people that do lockout, tag out, we call them authorized, right? That there's a particular training requirement for that, right? They have to know how to do it. But there's also another training requirement for people that don't do it, but are in the same area. Because we want those people to know what it is, why it's there, not to mess with it. So again, training can sometimes be for the person that has the most exposure, but think about the people that would be in the immediate vicinity. They could also need some training as well. Permit required confined space. There's a lot of training required if that's the type of work that you're doing. We do have a subpart R. I included this because certain industries, if you're not familiar with subpart R, if you can think of like logging, sawmills, textiles, dry cleaning, laundries, there's certain OSHA standards that are specific to that particular operation. So if any of those are something that you have involvement in, or that's your type of work environment, you should become familiar with that specific OSHA standard. Because again, as an example, if you work in a logging environment, right, you're cutting trees, there's some very specific OSHA regulations for that type of operation. There's very specific OSHA training requirements for that type of operation. So again, if any of these are categories or things that you would be involved with, or something you would have exposure to, please look further into that. The falls, that's a good one. Again, that was anytime you have an exposure to an elevated work surface, upper level, yeah, you need to have training for fall. Number one, how to recognize the hazard, and if necessary, how to protect yourself, right? Do they need fall protection? Do they need a harness? Do they need a lanyard? So again, a lot of these training requirements are spelled out in the OSHA standard. Let's go to the next slide. 1910.30, this is the one on falls. Again, I tried to pull out a few of these that I thought would be helpful, because this was actually something that was updated in 2016. So this is, to me, relatively new. We still have companies that they say, well, we didn't know this changed. And I'm going, well, yeah, it changed. Under 1910.30, it does now require, it says, before any employee is exposed to a fall hazard, the employer must provide training for each employee. And when I say a fall hazard, what's the height? What's the requirement in general industry where fall protection is required? Everybody knows it's 4 feet, right? So if you have an exposure to a fall of 4 feet or greater, right, from an upper level to a lower level, mezzanine, roof, where you at? You're, 4 feet above something else, and you have no protection, right? You would have an exposure. There's a training requirement now in general industry, and this particular language, it wasn't in there before 2016. So if that's something that you haven't been doing, you need to make sure that you get that done. So think of like maintenance personnel. That's an easy one to point to, right? If you have maintenance personnel that go onto the roof, they're checking, I don't know, HVAC unit. Yep, that's more than 4 feet off the ground or the lower level, right? So they would need training. And again, whenever we talk about training, I probably haven't said it up until this point. Always make sure that it's documented, right? And when you document it, you're doing a few things. What's the topic? When did it occur? Who was in attendance? Who provided the training? Who was the instructor? I guess, if it's not written down or documented, then it's harder to prove or demonstrate to the OSHA compliance staff. Don't get too hung up. I guess I've had people say, well, what if the employee won't sign it? I can't make somebody sign anything. If I was the company official, I would probably write down employee refused to sign and put their name down. I don't, they were trained. That's what you should include in the training record, right? That the employee was trained. To me, it's not necessary to show like an employee's signature. That's not written into the OSHA standard. Let's go to the next one. Silica is another one that we've been really, pointing to or trying to get companies to understand. Again, not everybody has this particular substance in their work environment, but if you do, again, look very closely at the training requirements. It's very important that you are providing the training to the people that would have exposure. 1910.1053, silica in the work environment can be very, very dangerous. Let's go to the next one. Temporary workers. We could do 8 hours on this, but I'll keep it brief. Temporary workers. What do we do? Do people use them? I'll say yes. More and more, we're finding companies are utilizing temp workers because of circumstance. Could be, currently, what is it? We have a very low unemployment rate. It's hard to find workers. We just have, production needs, so we need new people. You as a company, a staff, host company, please look at what training you're providing to your workers and then compare that to what training you're providing to temp workers. And to me, they should be very near identical. I don't know why or how companies don't understand this. If it is the staffing agency, they almost always say, well, we do provide training to our temp before we send them to your company. Okay, well, again, we just talked about this now for almost an hour. Site-specific hazards have to be included in the training. So you can't tell me that a staffing agency is providing HAZCOM training that would include all the chemicals that this company A has or company B has. They're different, right? It can't just be one training fits all. Nope, that's not how it works. If that was the case, right, the OSHA 10-hour class would be required. And as I said before, the OSHA 10-hour class is not a required class. It's touching up on the OSHA topics, giving you some understanding of what they include, but they're not going to satisfy an OSHA training requirement, right? Because there's just too much variety in the workplace, different types of equipment, different types of machines. So again, a staffing agency, if they tell you they train people, you should say, okay, well, that's good, but we need to train them on our procedures, policies, our work environment. So we do put out information, I guess, to my point. There is a website there at the bottom under the OSHA.gov temp workers. If you click on that, right, it's going to give you some verbiage and it's going to give you some information that hopefully is helpful. But it says, as an example, staffing agencies might provide general training, safety and health topics, but the host employer provides specific training to the particular workplace hazards and equipment. Let's go to the next one. We actually even put together, we're up to 10 now. It says the temporary worker information bulletins. So again, these are going to be probably 4, 5, 6 pages each, right? They're going to be probably little flyers, something that would be useful if you were to have these, put them in a binder if your company utilizes temp workers. And we've broken them out by topic. So, personal protective equipment under bulletin number 2. What does a temp worker need to understand? Well, if they're coming to your company, what PPE is required, how to use it. They need to demonstrate how to use it. Company needs to make it available, right? So again, these temporary worker information bulletins have been put out now they usually try to get a new one out every few years, but I can see here we're up to 10. So, they've been working on these, I'll say. These are, again, helpful. If you have temps, you have a particular topic that falls under the category of something you have, look at the web page there at the bottom, or look for the publication on protecting temp workers. Let's go to the next slide. Temporary worker initiative. Again, this was probably something on behalf of OSHA and some of the staffing companies that are out there. The larger ones came to us and they said, hey, we would be in favor if you could help, and we would be willing to help you. So again, they were, I'm sure, instrumental in putting together these bulletins. And again, useful outreach information if these are if this is something that you have at your company. Let's go to the next one. And the consultation service. I always like this part of the PowerPoint because I usually try to talk Dave up. Dave's been helping with this OSHA outreach for a number of years here at the SBDC. So I always want to give him time to explain the consultation program, and always try to give him a plug. The next slide, if you can, shows the website. Their website, in my opinion, is much better than my website because Dave has many resources on there that I don't. One of them being the videos. Dave, I like the videos. You guys put those together and they have tremendous amount of information. So I'm going to finish up here and let Dave talk. But if you do have further questions, I'll be watching the chat and I'll try to answer those as we go.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Go ahead, Dave. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Cindy. You go ahead to the next slide. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Yanishuk from the Pennsylvania OSHA Consultation Program, which operates out of IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. What OSHA Consultation does, it's a free service for a small business to assist them in safety and health compliance, OSHA, related type issues. If you're like me, you hear the word free service, my initial thought is, yeah, right, nothing's free. Somebody's paying for it. And the answer to that as it relates to us is the service is free to you, the private sector employer, the user. Our funding comes from the Department of Labor, the same place that the funding comes from OSHA enforcement. What we're chartered to do is provide free safety and health services to small businesses in Pennsylvania. And for our purposes, what a small and medium-sized business is, it's less than 250 employees at the site, less than 500 corporate wide. So that's kind of who our clientele base is. And what happens is businesses submit a request for service, and then we meet those requests based off of various factors, such as employers in high hazard industries, involved in particularly hazardous operations, involved in operations where there may be an emphasis program. So it's something that OSHA enforcement is emphasizing from a hazard standpoint. We'll up those businesses when they were put a request in for an on-site visit, essentially. Businesses that are larger, from time to time, we will be able to accommodate businesses that may have, let's say a business has more than 500 employees corporate wide, but they put a request in and they're like, hey, we're a small business. We just got bought out by we're technically owned by a big holding company. They don't really provide us with any service. We still need some help. We'll still try to service those businesses as we can fit them in the schedule. But typically, we may have to limit the scope a little bit on what we're looking at just from a time standpoint. Go ahead, Cindy, to the next slide. So some of the services that we perform, once again, everything's free. Kind of our bread and butter are physical hazard evaluations, where we come out to your site, either for a full scope visit, meaning, hey, we're kind of looking at everything from a hazard standpoint, or a limited scope, meaning you have us out to look at one particular item. An example of that may be is a business says, hey, we just got notification from OSHA that our business is part of this emphasis program for amputations, for example. And in that communication, they let us know that you folks are available to provide free services. Can you come out and do a hazard evaluation? But I'd kind of like to limit it to just this emphasis program for amputations. I really don't want to get into noise, cranes, all that kind of stuff. Let's just focus on whatever OSHA should be looking at as part of this emphasis program. And for example, that would be, mainly machine guarding, lockout, tagout, things like that. So we could do that. You're the business, you put the request in for services. Nobody's forcing you to use us. We're there to do whatever you want from a request standpoint. So that's kind of our bread and butter, those physical hazard evaluations. We'll also do industrial hygiene, exposure monitoring. So, hey, noise dosimetries, welding fume analysis, air monitoring, wherever it may be from a industrial hygiene standpoint. We could do that for you for free as well. We'll also do written program assessment and development assistance. So we'll kind of work to help you determine, hey, what written programs does OSHA require to have? Just as Mark was speaking to, hey, there's training requirements. There's also, for various standards, written program requirements. So we'll help you determine, hey, what do you have? What don't you have? What do you need? And then based off of what you need, we have templates for a lot of that stuff. So you could use those templates to develop your site-specific programs and not essentially start from square one. Next one would be training assessment and development assistance. So kind of going back to like what Mark said, if you call us and say, hey, we need training next Tuesday and we want fork truck, lockout, tag out, HazCom, we would say, hey, all right, hold on. We don't know exactly what you need yet. We've never been to your facility, so we can't come out and do site-specific training. But what we could do is let's start with, we'll do an on-site visit and help you determine what you need based off of what hazards your employees are exposed to, what standards apply, what you've done up to this point. So let's take a look at what you need, determine that. And then based off of what we decide you need from a regulatory standpoint, we have resources to give you to help with a lot of that. So whether it's, hey, we have pre-developed PowerPoint presentations, which we could give you, take this presentation, put your site-specific information in and call it your own. It's yours. And then train your employees. So we can help you with a lot of that stuff. We also have on our website, as and Mark had pointed out, we developed some e-tools, some brief topics we'll go over from an informational standpoint. So for example, we talked a lot about power industrial truck training. We'll have a video on power industrial truck training, which is going to be like a 5, 6, 7 minute video to kind of help you as the employer understand what you're required to do. So we have a lot of those resources available on our website. Really anybody can access those at any time. We also do some post-OSHA inspection compliance assistance. So for example, hey, OSHA enforcement came out to our facility. They cited us relative to some things with fork trucks. Maybe one of those would be fork truck training. Can you come out and help us? And once again, you were cited. You've come to your settlement with OSHA, whether it's formally or informally. The citation's already happened. Now it's just, hey, we have a due date we have to meet relative to notifying them that we've corrected the hazard. So we could come out at that point and help you with, all right, let's help you get up to speed with your training. With one of the things maybe you weren't doing were the hands-on evaluations. Hey, here's a form to use. So whoever you're going to have internally do that hands-on training, here's a form they can use to document that. So we could come out after the fact and help you meet the deadlines and the due dates to verify correction of some of those hazards that were cited by OSHA enforcement. Next, we do safety and health management system program evaluation and development assistance. And that's specifically what I do within the program is try to help a lot of organizations evaluating their overall safety and health management system and look for opportunities to proactively improve that system, essentially. We also do free offsite daily telephone calls or emails. So you can always call us, ask a question relative to compliance, send an email. We have safety and health consultants on duty every day to take those calls and answer those questions. Also do presentations, webinars, seminars on various topics. And then something that came about through during COVID was virtual assessments. So we do have some ability to look at some specific things virtually. So if it's one particular machine you want us to look at, one particular process, there are some capabilities where we can do some of that stuff without even necessarily coming on site. And once again, everything that we do for the business is free. Go ahead, Cindy. All the consultants we have that would potentially come out and visit your organization if you put a request in, we're all faculty in the safety science department at IUP. So you as an employer are going to know that, hey, you're getting a knowledgeable, experienced safety professional, coming out to your facility. We're all board certified safety professional CSPs and certified industrial hygienists, CIHs. And who would get assigned to your request is kind of based on geographically where you're located within the state and what you're requesting from a service standpoint. We have our consultants located strategically throughout PA. So although on this presentation today, most folks may be from the northwestern part of the state, we have consultants within our program that are faculty at IUP that live in the Philadelphia area, the Scranton area, Harrisburg. So we're throughout the state. And what that kind of helps us do is just meet the needs of the clients a little quicker, so the travel isn't such of an issue. Go ahead, Cindy, the next slide. The only way we come out to do an on-site visit for you is if you, as the employer, put a request in for service. And that's where it's a little different from enforcement. Enforcement's going to go where they go based off of reports of catastrophic events, complaints, emphasis programs, things like that. So they're going to go where they go. You're not necessarily ever going to ask enforcement to come out. In consultation, you have to request us to come out. So you have to put a request in and ask for our service. However, when you do that, the businesses that put requests in and we work with, that's 100% confidential. So we are prohibited from providing any of that information to enforcement, to attorneys, to lawyers pursuing liability cases, etc. Anything we do for you, the report, the notification of the hazards we found that we're going to have you correct, the results of the air sampling, that's all yours. We don't provide that or share that with anybody. You do with it whatever suits your needs the best, but nobody else other than you has access to that information. Go ahead to the next slide, Cindy. So unlike enforcement, we don't issue citations, fines, penalties, anything like that. Now, if you ask us to come out to evaluate something, and we identify a serious hazard, okay? Part of using the service is you agree to correct that serious hazard. And before we wrap the visit up, we come up with a due date. Typically we go out 2 months, but we'll come up with a due date of, hey, how long is it going to take you to correct that? And then what you have to do is then within the report that we give you, there's just a form on there you fill out to send us verification that you corrected the hazard by that due date. So It's a free service. The catch is you have to agree to correct serious or imminent danger hazards, essentially. And I can tell you, typically that's not an issue. 99.999% of the businesses that bring us out have complete intention of correcting serious hazards. What they just need some help with is identifying those hazards, determine what the requirement is, and then determining what the appropriate solution should be. Now, another benefit to using our service is if you put a request in for a visit, we come out to your site, maybe we've identified some hazards relative to what you have in our scope as far as what they're looking at. While you're working on correcting that stuff, you're exempt from OSHA programmed inspections. And a programmed inspection would be like that random inspection where OSHA shows up because your business is part of some emphasis program. So for example, let's say you as a business realize that, hey, look, we're our business is part of this emphasis program on warehousing. Okay, for example. So you put a request in and say, hey, can you come out and we know we're part of this warehousing emphasis OSHA consultation. Come out and take a look and help us out, determine if we're in compliance or not. So we come out, we look at that OSHA emphasis for warehousing. We do walk through your facility, realize, hey, maybe you have a couple physical hazards out in your warehouse that need corrected. Maybe there's a gap relative to fork truck training. So we've identified that, given you some resources, come up with a due date for you to get that done. Okay, you put the request in, it's all confidential. We've done the visit. You're working on correcting the stuff we've identified. Next week, OSHA enforcement knocks on the door. Once again, they don't know where we're going and who we're working with. So they knock on the door. They say, hey, you guys are part of this warehousing emphasis. We'd like to come in and do an inspection. At that point, you could say, hey, we're actually in open OSHA consultation right now. And part of that consultation was reviewing the warehousing emphasis. They leave. Okay. So you put a request in. Subsequently, OSHA does a random inspection. You're actively working with us. They won't do the inspection. So that's just kind of another give back to being proactive and using the service. Okay, Cindy, going to the next slide. Just a couple other things I'd like to talk about real quick would be there is a program called SHARP, which is the Safety and Health Achievement Recognition Program. Some of you out there may have, if you hadn't heard of SHARP, maybe you've heard of VPP, Voluntary Protection Program. What SHARP is, it's a voluntary recognition program for businesses that have achieved exceptional performance relative to safety and health. So it's an award that we give out through us here at OSHA Consultation for small businesses in Pennsylvania if they achieve certain metrics relative to their scores on their evaluation for their safety and health management system and maintaining low injury and illness rates. So currently in Pennsylvania, we have about 40 businesses throughout the state enrolled in this program, and there's a lot of recognition goes with it. In addition to exemption from federal OSHA inspections, those random inspections for upwards of 3 years. So for any of the businesses out there that may be interested in something like this, you can reach out to us. Go ahead, Cindy, the next slide. And we've also, within the past year, have gained approval to begin recognizing some construction job site throughout Pennsylvania as being SHARP as well. So if anybody out there is in the construction industry, just something else I'd like to throw out there. Go ahead, Cindy. All right, so now hopefully you maybe would like to request a visit from our program. There's our phone number and website. Probably the website's the easiest and quickest way to submit the request. Go ahead, Cindy, the next slide. Once you get on our page, if you scroll down, you'll see a tab there for request a free consultation. Click that link. On the page will pop up. Hey, who's going to be the contact? Where's the business? What's the address? Contact phone number, email. What are you requesting from a service standpoint? And then we'll take it from there. We'll take that request. One of our admins will assign you consultants based off of what your need is, geographically where you're located within the state. And then that consultant will reach out to you to schedule the visit. Go ahead, Sydney. Just a few other resources and information we have on our website. We've done some testimonials, which are just real quick videos, 5 to 10 minutes from businesses that have used the service in the past that agreed to, hey, we'll come on and talk about it a little bit as far as our experiences with the program. So just some, information out there. If you're on the fence, not really sure, you can pull up those testimonial videos and get a little bit more information. Go ahead, Cindy, to the next slide. Just another thing I'd like to throw out there is There are some additional free safety and health training resources through the Pennsylvania Department of Labor, which is called PATHS, PATHS. Some great resources out there. Some of it they do via webinar. Some of it they'll actually come on site and do, and it's all free. So there's a ton of different topics they cover. I'd recommend for anybody on this webinar today to, when you get some time, maybe Google search that, pull it up, and just take a look at their training schedules, the topics they offer. Just another good training resource out there. I'd just like to to mention to everybody. Okay, Cindy. And there's my information there. If anybody has a question specifically about consultation, feel free to send me an email, give me a call. That's my direct line there, so you can call me on that. And that'd be it. So just like to open up to any questions.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, David. We appreciate you guys being with us today. And yes, we are going to stick around. If you guys have any questions, feel free to throw it into the Q&A. I'm also happy to unmute you so that you can actually ask a question directly without having to type it all in. Sometimes that's hard to do and easier just to ask it. All you have to do is just throw in your request into the chat. And so just as a reminder, a couple of things. We will be sharing the slides that you've seen today. We will be sharing the recording, and we will be sharing some additional resources that Mark mentioned during his presentation. I'll also be sending out an evaluation shortly after ending today's webinar. And that evaluation is used to help us make sure that we are presenting topics in a manner and a way that you are most interested. If you are interested in a specific OSHA topic, we're planning our 2024 topics right now. And we are very open to hearing the specific types of training that you would like. We are happy to do training in person. And so we're looking at doing that as well. In person, maybe hybrid, virtually. So everything is on the table. So we're looking for your feedback with that. So with that, I don't see any additional questions. You guys have done a great job answering the questions while we have been going through today's webinar. And if, Sandy, do you have any final thoughts? Just turn it over to you.
No, Mark, David, you did such a great job. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Everybody hears OSHA, and it's so scary when you think about codes and regulations and violations. I just want to encourage everybody to reach out to David and Mark. They love this stuff. They are experts at this. So please reach out, ask them the questions. That's what they're there for. They're there to help you, as are we. So please do.
Thanks, Sandy. I appreciate your collaboration. Look forward to continuing to collaborate with the Gannon SPDC throughout 2024. Mark and David, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next year. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye now.